camera opens in silence. No dramatic music yet, just the sound of old coins gently sliding across a wooden desk under a dim lamp. A collector's hand pauses over a worn little piece of metal, dark around the edges, slightly faded, almost forgotten by time. At first glance, it doesn't look valuable at all. In fact, most people would probably toss it into a jar without thinking twice. But this tiny copper-nickel coin from British West Africa, dated 1932, carries a story that stretches across empires, world trade routes, colonial history, and a collector market that has quietly exploded in curiosity over the last few years. And what makes this particular coin fascinating isn't just its age. It's the strange journey it took to survive nearly a century when so many others disappeared forever. Back in 1932, the world was in a difficult place. The Great Depression had shaken economies across continents, and even territories under British rule felt the pressure. British West Africa, which included areas that are now Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia, relied heavily on trade currency for daily life. Coins weren't just pocket change back then. They moved through crowded ports, open-air markets, railway stations, and villages where merchants traded everything from cocoa beans to textiles. Every scratch on these coins today hints at a real human story. Somebody once carried this exact type of coin in a pocket while boarding a steamship. Someone may have used it to buy food during uncertain economic times. That connection to real history is exactly what draws collectors in. Now, here's where things become interesting. The 1932 issue stands out because it comes from a period when mint production numbers were not always consistent, and surviving high-grade examples became surprisingly difficult to find decades later. Most of these coins circulated heavily. They weren't protected in albums or stored in safes. They were used hard, exposed to tropical climates, humidity, rough handling, and years of wear. So when collectors today find one with sharp details still visible, especially clear lettering, strong edge definition, and minimal corrosion, it immediately attracts attention. And there's another detail many people completely miss. Some 1932 British West Africa copper-nickel coins show subtle strike differences depending on how they were produced at the mint. These differences can include sharper portrait details, spacing variations in lettering, or cleaner reverse designs. To an average person, those changes might seem tiny, but to collectors, those tiny differences can mean the difference between an ordinary coin and a highly desirable one. That's the psychology of coin collecting that outsiders rarely understand. It's not always about gold or silver. Sometimes it's about rarity hiding in plain sight. What makes British West Africa coins especially unique in the American collector market is the historical crossover appeal. In the United States, collectors often focus heavily on American coins. But there's a growing group of enthusiasts fascinated by colonial-era world coins. Because they tell stories, American coins simply cannot. A 1932 British West Africa coin represents trade, empire, migration, and economic survival during one of the toughest global decades in modern history. It's a physical artifact from a world that no longer exists, and believe it or not, many of these coins were once overlooked for decades. Older collectors remember boxes of world coins sitting untouched at flea markets and estate sales throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Dealers would often sell them in bulk because demand simply wasn't there. But as online collecting communities grew, people began rediscovering overlooked international coins. Suddenly, collectors started asking questions. Which years are harder to find? Which mint conditions survive? Which designs had lower survival rates? That curiosity changed everything. Imagine this for a moment. A family in the United States inherits an old cigar box from a grandfather who served overseas decades ago. Inside are random foreign coins, mixed together with old photographs and faded stamps. Most look ordinary. Mader 2040.phone. But tucked near the bottom is a dark-toned 1932 British West Africa copper-nickel coin. Ibad intertuntatoi transtantwader. Nobody notices it at first. Then one evening, someone searches the date online out of curiosity. Within minutes, they realize collectors have been actively hunting well-preserved examples. That moment, the sudden realization that an overlooked object has real historical and collector interest is exactly the emotional spark that keeps this hobby alive. Now, it's important to stay realistic here. Not every 1932 British West Africa coin is worth a fortune. Condition matters enormously. Coins with heavy wear, scratches, corrosion, or environmental damage are generally far more common and usually sell for modest amounts. But cleaner examples with strong details and original surfaces can attract serious collector attention, especially when professionally graded. In recent years, demand for world coins in certified holders has increased because buyers want authenticity and condition, verification before spending larger amounts. One of the lesser-known facts about these coins is how difficult it actually was for them to survive in high condition compared to many European or American coins from the same era. Tropical humidity and storage conditions across West Africa often accelerated corrosion and surface damage over time. That means truly attractive survivors became naturally scarcer without anybody planning it. In a strange way, the environment itself helped create rarity. And there's another layer that makes the 1932 issue fascinating. During the early 1930s, political and economic tensions were quietly reshaping colonial systems around the world. Coins like this circulated during a transitional period that would eventually lead to major independence movements decades later. So collectors aren't just holding metal. They're holding a witness to historical change. If you've ever wondered why collectors spend hours studying tiny details under magnification, this is why. Every coin becomes part detective story, part historical puzzle, and part treasure hunt. A small variation in strike quality or preservation can completely change collector interest. That suspense is addictive. Even experienced collectors still get excited when they discover a coin with unusually sharp detail hiding in an old collection. In today's market, interest in historical world coins continues growing because younger collectors are entering the hobby through online videos, auctions, and social media communities. American buyers especially are beginning to appreciate coins that tell global stories, rather than focusing only on domestic currency. The 1932 British West Africa copper-nickel coin fits perfectly into that trend because it combines affordability, history, colonial-era design, and genuine scarcity in higher grades. And honestly, one of the most fascinating parts of this hobby is realizing how ordinary objects survive extraordinary periods of history. This coin existed during the Great Depression. It survived World War II. It outlived the British colonial system in West Africa. It traveled through generations of hands. And somehow, against all odds, examples still appear today in old collections, estate boxes, and forgotten drawers. That's what makes coin collecting feel different from almost any other hobby. You're not just buying metal. You're reconnecting with forgotten human stories.